Hello everyone and welcome back to Crayon Code. Let's start getting to know CSS grid layout and build a nice little credit card. Just make sure to like and subscribe to my channel to never miss an update. So let's get this started with, for today I actually picked a slightly unusual use case, but before I was trying to build it with Flexbox and then I got into CSS grid layout and it made it so much easier, so I decided to have a go at it. So for the markup, we are having a div which is getting the credit card class. And a credit card usually displays several different information. One is I'm simply calling it provider here. It's going to be, I just picked the font awesome icon, which is the Visa, where I'm simply including the font awesome brand's style, and the corresponding item is the Visa icon. And of course, every credit card has a number on it, which will just, in any application, the full credit card number usually is not shown, which I'm just simulating here by putting a few X's and some sample data. And of course, for each credit card, the good through label is always given, where I'm just going to put the actual text good through in 2 lines actually. Yeah, of course, the actual good through date, which for sakeness of completeness, let's put it for September 2024. And of course there is a and of course there's a card holder. Let's call her Jane Doe. And to actually give this a slightly good use case, we will have an indicator for the validity. This one is actually still valid, and let's have a link that allows the user to actually click on that button and select this credit card as payment method. So we're in the use case of a small web shop. And now let's actually make that look nice. So we are heading right into the CSS code. Just note that I have been including 2 things. One is the share tag mono font, which slightly resembles the font which is used in credit cards, and I included font awesome brand style here in the CSS settings. There down below here, font awesome is included, so just bear that in mind. So let's actually start styling our wrapper div, which I'm going to use the font family with the share tag mono font I just included, and as a fallback, let's use the monospace font. Of course, let's put it color white because background's quite dark, and 1 pixel solid border. Let's make it a slight white, and since every credit card has rounded corners, ours as well is going to have that. So I can actually see that the font is already applied, so this actually looks a little bit like a credit card. And since everyone's into it right now, let's give it a slight glassmorphism look with 4 pixels blur filter on the backdrop, and of course a slight white background so that the effect is actually shining through. And this G here is superfluous actually. So very nice. And of course, to make it slightly look a little bit elevated, give it a little bit of a drop shadow, 20% of black. And since we do not want the text actually to be directly at the border, give it a padding of 1 rem. So very nice. And let's actually see, I totally messed this one up here. So border is now present. Very good. So, and now, if you remember credit card, you know that every information has its certain space, and trying to achieve this with Flexbox gets really, really ugly. And this is actually where grid layout comes into play, as it really, really helps us to position things, content on a certain position, and not just having a flow-based layout, but we can really pick the regions where we actually want to put stuff. So let's do it that way, that we first enable the grid layout on the wrapper itself. And now I want to have 4 rows and 4 columns in the grid layout. And let's actually, I'm going to use the fraction unit here, because as soon as you start using gaps, the fractions really help you if you do not want to have absolute width or heights of the columns or rows. And as soon as you have a gap, fraction isn't actually the one you want to use. So bear that in mind. And for the columns, it's basically the same. We want four equal columns, which are slightly spaced with 0.75 rems. Yeah. Okay, now, and you see it actually got quite messy, but this is only due to the case that we haven't fully configured the grid yet, and every child, we haven't assigned any position yet. So this is what we're actually going to do next. An awesome feature of grid layout is that you're able to put named regions, named areas in your grid layout. Since we have 4 rows and 4 columns now, we can now define via the grid template areas which information is spanned across which columns or rows, so that we actually can define it here on the wrapper and do not have to define on the child which column number and which row number and how many columns it spans. We define it here on the main layout, which is actually really neat. So I want to have the provider in the top left corner, and the other 3 cells I want to be left blank, which is why I'm putting dots here. So this defines the first line. In the second line, I want to have the number, and the number is quite long, so I want it to span all 4 columns. And now in the third line, I want to have first the good through label, then the good through value, then a blank cell, and an indicator for the validity. So I can actually see that the credit card, based on its date, is still valid. And in the last line, I want to have the holder spanned across 3 columns. And in the end, in the very right corner, I want to have the select button. So, and this is actually how I now define the regions, the areas in my grid layout. And you can see in every line, we have 4 lines, and in every line, 4 positions are taken. And here, this one is too much. So now it's 4 in every line. And the simple part now is actually that we're just going to define for the provider class that it's going to be in the grid area provider. And yeah, of course, here you won't see a difference. But if we repeat that for the number, this one here is missing a B. And so you can already see it properly got repositioned, which is really, really nice. And now for the good through information, we have to put a little bit more work into it. So let's first configure the good through label itself. So we have defined a grid area, which we're just going to use here. Good through label. And actually note, there is never a quote around it. So it is not actually necessary here. You can just put them as unquoted identifiers. And yeah, you can see the font size is not really well configured here. Let's actually also switch back to a font that doesn't have serifs. So fallback font sans serif. And the text transform, if you look at your credit card, usually it's given in uppercase here. And it's slightly smaller, so I want to have it in 0.65 rems, and this looks actually already much better. And now directly on the same line, but 1 cell next to it, I want to have the good through value. And here, of course, we already have also defined our grid area, which is called good through value. And you can see it's properly positioned here, that 1 cell is taken and the next cell is also taken, and it's always, no matter how you size the credit card, it always matches up with the grid. And this is really, really great. So, and finally, let's put the holder information, the card holder information, and yeah, quite straightforward. So let's put it down there. Now all that's left is the valid and select style, and we're going to use a little bit more sophisticated styling here. So let's first start with the validity, which is also simply a div, but yeah, let's put it into the grid area validity, same name, and let's give it a nice green color. So let's put a border around it, and I think this one is going to be a little bit more darker, one of my usual colors, a little bit of a darker green, and I think font size 1 rem will totally be enough. Yeah, a little bit smaller because we usually want to denote by the color what's important. And font weight 400. Yeah, it's actually not needed here. So now let's put it a nice background for it. This is also one of my usual colors, and a nice little shine on it with a 45 degrees gradient going from a transparent black up until, yeah, it's good that way, up until 25% white, which is at 100%. Yeah, looks much better right now. And to center text horizontally and vertically, let's here actually use flex and justify the content in center and also align the items along their axis via center. So that's actually a quite easy way to center text horizontally and vertically without using strange things like line height and text align. So this one actually already I found it to work. And let's make it a little bit stand out more. So let's give it a back box shadow. 3 pixels, 6 pixels, and yeah, 50% of a black. So this will make it a little bit more stand out. Very nice. And the select button I want to also make quite well visible. So let's put it, of course, first in the right position, which is also called select. And yeah, let's give it also a nice background. Yeah, let's use a slightly bluish color with the same, which I can actually copy from here. Let's use the same shine on this one. So we get a, yeah, very good. And a slightly darker border. Very nice. And of course this one needs a color white because we do not want to have this the link color. And actually I think it looks better here if we have also a non-serif font. So let's also use later here and have a fallback to sans serif. And of course font size is way too large, so we scale it also down a little bit and get rid of that unnecessary text decoration. And of course let's put it also in the center. Yeah, justify content and align items. And of course let's also let's make it stand out a little bit more. So give it a box shadow, and this way, yeah, it's a nice little link. Yeah, it's actually a little bit, let's be a little bit more playful here. Let's make the box shadow transitionable and transform also transitionable 250 milliseconds. And whenever the link is getting active, let's shift the box shadow to the center of the object, but keep the blur, make it a little bit less blurred, and yeah, also make the black a little bit less visible. And yeah, that would be actually cool if we translate it 1 pixel left and upwards, missing comma here, and this will actually give a nice effect of the button actually being pressed. So yeah, it looks kind of great. Yeah, you can see positioning the items here was absolutely no trouble. Once you have the grid structure, you can just define your areas and put the stuff where you want it to be, and this is really, really easy. And now if you actually take a look at the DevTools, because Chrome DevTools help us a lot with the CSS grid layout, because if you hover over the wrapping, you can see the grid structure. And in the Chrome DevTools, there's also a small grid label. If you click it, you get the grid structure being displayed with the indices. And this greatly helps if you want to decide which column number is where. And it's really, really helps. You can also find layout glitches, because sometimes content flows over the cell or makes the cell larger than you actually want it to be. And this way you can actually really nicely debug your layout, which is a great help. Yeah, that's it for now. There's still so much more to explore with CSS grid layout, so stay tuned and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.